Well, I like to talk about why I've been painting mountains for the last, 6, 8 years. And the irony of it is 50 years ago when Steve and I came back to Oregon from New York City, where we both were getting graduate degrees, his parents and his parents' friends were very friendly, and we went into their houses, and I said to Steve, why do all these houses have pictures of Mount Hood in them on the wall? I mean, they can just go outside and look at it. And so it was an expression of frustration that these were people that weren't interested in modernism, and they weren't interested in anything that was expressionistic or of any sort. So I looked at these. Sometimes they were photographs of Mount Hood, sometimes they were paintings of Mount Hood, and I said, this gets boring. And then another thing that happened was I started teaching at PNCA, which was the Museum Art School, and I had a student, Cactus Snotty, who had gone up to Mount Hood on the back of a motorcycle. Paul Missel was driving the motorcycle, and they'd seen the mountain, and she had taken a photograph, and she said to me, I want to make a painting of this. And I said, fine. And I said, here's what you got to do. You got to look at the value of the light, the sunlight on the snow, the color and the value of that bright white, and then you got to look at the shadow on the snow, and then you do the exact same thing on the parts of the mountain that are melted. So you got a light dark on the snow and a light dark on the rock. And then you put it all together, it's simple. Well, it's not so simple as all of that, but she made a good painting. She made a good painting, and I still remember this conversation because I thought I had been very clever to tell her that. But what I didn't realize is you have to get the angle of the shapes right. You have to push and pull the angle of the shapes so that you're convinced by the way they catch the light, you're convinced by the volume. And when I started doing it myself, I remembered that one time when I had this conversation with her. And I thought, this is so funny. This was years and years and years ago. Sometimes you remember stuff you tell students. You do. Anyway, I should tell you that I have a few props. And these are pieces of basalt. And if you set them in front of a window, they catch the light in different ways. And they're not truly cubist, but they certainly have angles and planes on them. And sometimes when I get into difficulties in a painting and I have some foreground shapes that I want to look like big boulders, I get these out, and I have 6 or 8 of them, and they help me see volume, and they help me see color. There's more color in here than you might think. And this is collected from the bottom of a scree slope in the Columbia Gorge, where Steve and I often would pull off and walk along the trails there. And sometimes we'd go up on the slopes, and sometimes we'd just walk on the bottom. And these little pieces of rock would be scattered because it's all falling down the hill, because it comes from the columnar basalt up higher that breaks off, and then it all comes. That's what scree is. This is what scree is. Also, I want to emphasize that having gotten involved with paintings of Mount St. Helens due to Dawson Carr's project at the museum, which is now, you can't visit it now, but hopefully they'll have a chance to go see it again because it's going to go through until January. So I got this wonderful book by Kevin Scott, who's a terrific geologist who for many years was involved in the volcano project that's centered on St. Helens. And this cover just killed me. It was so beautiful. So I made it the source of this one painting. And here's another thing we should talk about. What is the purpose and use of photographs in relation to a painter? And it's different for every painter that uses them. But in fact, it's like a diving board. You get on the diving board and you bounce, and then you go as far up in the air as you can, and then you come down and point your body into the ocean or the water or whatever. But that's how I feel about what happens with a photograph. It's a beginning. And sometimes I get in trouble with a painting and I can't get the figure ground of the sky and the mountain right, or there are a lot of different things. And I go back to the photo and I say to myself, well, I don't have the answer in this photo. I have to invent the answer. And so that's where some of some of the things come that you're looking at. But for example, this painting here that's called Building Blocks, definitely I was looking at these boulders for that one, these little boulders. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Overlap. I think the thing with the mountain is that the mountain overlaps the sky, and that overlap is continually renegotiated as you're working inside the shapes of the mountain and inside the shapes of the sky and inside the color. So that whole thing goes back to my abstract paintings that focused on triangles. I had a whole series of triangular paintings. I mean, the outside edge was not a triangle. The outside edge was a rectangle or a square, but there were triangles inside, and what I liked about the triangles is that the leftovers are also triangles. So this whole issue of where the triangles are and where the curves are and where the smudges are and where the mixed color is and where the splashy color is, all of this becomes totally, in many ways, abstract. Because you can solve these problems any way you want if you're a painter. That's the whole point. And so it's that sort of activation of the surface of the painting in relation to the rectangle, which is what causes me to be so interested in this project that I'm on right now, which is painting mountains. And some of these mountains have reflections like this one and that one and the looking glass one. And what I found with the reflections, and I think this is extremely funny, everybody knows you see a reflection and it's reversed, and you know it is because you know that's true when you look at your own face in the mirror. However, when I get to actually painting a reflection of a mountain, whether I have a photo or I'm making it up, I find it's harder than I thought. I find it's much harder than I thought. I think, well, this is obvious, I can do this, and then I'm working away on it several weeks later and thinking, oh, you didn't get this right and you didn't get that right, what's the matter with you? So anyway, it's the difficulty of making these paintings that keeps me doing it. It's the feeling that, you know, there's interesting ways of catching color and catching light with the paint. And always remember that in real life, what you see is light, and in the painting, what you see is pigment. And so when you're trying to mix the pigment or use the pigment, and by the way, when I was a student, we used white lead. Not anymore. It's all titanium white. But the fact is, we used white lead, and it strikes me as very funny that lead, which you think of as a grayish color, makes a brilliant white once you've cooked it properly. So anyway, when you look at those old Impressionist paintings that have beautiful white in them, and Bertha Morisot comes to mind, you're seeing lead. So how funny is that? And then the other thing is, there's a lot of heavy metals in my paint, which is the same kind of pigment that is in oil paint, but these are all acrylic. And the heavy metals are cobalt, cadmium, chromium, what else? Mostly cobalt, cadmium, and chromium, no more lead. But I have 4 colors of cadmium red, and I have 4 or 5 colors of cobalt blue and cobalt turquoise and all kinds of different blues, and then I have chromium green. And the thing I think about these colors that are based on heavy metals is that somebody mined them, and then somebody cooked them. And I'm thinking, okay, natural color is gorgeous, but I sort of admire these paint pots that I have, and every morning when I go to the studio, I open the top of the paint, unscrew the top and look in there and say, oh my God, look at that cobalt blue, it's fantastic. So I do try to use some strong color. Maybe when you look at the mountains, you don't see that color, but that's not the point. The point is I got it to work with and I should use it. And it's sort of a case of gratitude to whoever mined it, because I do not think that artist colors represent the biggest purpose for which things are mined. I think we're a tiny fraction of what actually gets used when the miners are out there digging up the cobalt or whatever. Or the lapis lazuli. I read this wonderful story about people in Afghanistan looking for a particular river that was famous for having boulders in it that were made out of lapis lazuli. And finally they get there, and there are these beautiful dark blue lapis lazuli boulders. And it's so stunning that the water is blue from the sky and it's blue from the boulders, and they just could hardly, their jaws are dropping. Well, lapis lazuli, that's what they ground up to make Mary's cloak in all those religious paintings. They ground up lapis lazuli. It was very expensive. And when the artist was finished, he had to give the bag of ground up lapis lazuli back to whoever had paid him because he couldn't keep it. So it's kind of interesting where color comes from. What else do I need to tell you? It's a great honor to have this show. I hope people will come in and see it. I think I'm really lucky. I think I'm lucky to be able to make these paintings. I think I'm lucky to have a good gallery to show in. I think I'm lucky that people like them enough sometimes to buy them. And I feel a tremendous sense of gratitude in all this anxiety that we're in the middle of. I mean, you know, the virus is morphing, and in a way, the land is morphing too. It's just a different kind of motion. But just think, the center of the earth is a big, very dense, very hot ball of iron in the center of the earth. And that's why our magnetic poles are moving, because this hot ball of iron is affecting how the magnets in your compasses work. So a lot of the things they do when they go up on the Arctic Ocean, they're not using magnetic directions, they're using satellite stuff. Because the magnetic stuff is so far out of sync. What else? Big thank you to Martha for doing this.